Welcome to the Unzip Mind podcast. My name is Nick Smith. I'm here with Dylan Jessen, Greg Minikis, and Jessa is a guest with us today who is a mental health therapist.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks for coming
Thanks
down.
for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. We've had already so many good conversations.
Yeah. Now we're just going to reboot them.
I wish we were just doing all of those.
Yeah, well, we'll get back into it.
The off-camera conversations.
Yeah.
And those are valuable.
Yeah.
Jessa, how would you describe your background and what you do?
I'm a licensed therapist in the state of Washington. What do you mean by my background?
Well, how'd you get into the kind of therapy that you do? What do you currently, what kind of therapy do you currently practice? Just, give us a little elevator pitch for who you are and what you do.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm a mindfulness-based transpersonal counselor.
Transpersonal, interesting.
I was at a comedy show last night, and one of my friends, a comedian, he was like, wait, what kind of therapy do you do again? And I was like, I have my master's in mindfulness-based transpersonal counseling. And he goes, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to guess.
It's a lot of words, but they all mean something.
Yeah, exactly. Transpersonal, if you take it from the Latin root and you look at the etymology of the word, trans is beyond and persona is self. So my type of therapy is to go beyond the self with my clients.
You do in-person, just teletherapy?
In person.
In person.
Yeah. I do have some telehealth clients that prefer it that way, but I like feeling y'all.
Yeah.
We did that meditation earlier and I could hear your breath and I could feel your energy and I need that. I need that for healing.
In person does
like
build
that.
a closer connection, get people's body language because, it's easy to just sort of like pretend like everything's fine and that you're, perfectly in balance when all they see is just this part. But like you could be fidgeting under here. And so I always feel more comfortable with someone after I've spent more time in person.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's super
I have a
valuable.
client, or a few clients that I'll say something and I'll notice their foot start to twitch and I'm like, I'm going to return to that later.
You can see those body cues pick up where you're like, oop, hit a mark. What's up?
Right
We're
away.
going to come back to that when you're ready.
So tell me about your mom. And they're like biting their nail immediately.
Yeah,
I'm like, okay.
Okay.
I got you.
See that a little
I like that.
I usually take the opposite approach. If I see someone's foot jiggle from something I say, I avoid that topic, but I'm not a therapist.
Yeah, exactly.
So just
I
try
can't help them keep avoiding,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
I think that's what the absolute, what therapy is avoidance.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're trying to run at the problems that make your foot twitch.
But tactfully, you'd probably,
Tactfully.
if you see the foot twitch, you'll probably give them some space from that topic initially, and then maybe return to it later when you think it's appropriate.
Yeah, I'll point it out. I point it out and say,
You
what
point
do
out the foot twitch
Of course.
in the
yeah.
moment.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Always in the moment.
And that is something that you can't do via Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, I have people sit pretty far back in my telehealth session so I can see their full body, and I do as well. But yeah, I'll say, that's really interesting. I said something about your mom, and your foot started to twitch.
Huh.
And, usually in the beginning of therapy with me, as a somatic counselor, soma, Latin root is body, so studying the body, they'll be like, oh, no, it means nothing. I love that. No, it means nothing. Your body doesn't mean nothing.
That's when they really want to avoid that topic.
Or a lot of them don't even realize
Well, yeah.
that they have those movements.
Yep.
Yeah, there was research done that said 60% of what we say is through our body language,
Yeah.
I got to be in person for that.
Yeah.
Be watching
Yeah.
it.
That's
You
something-
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, it's something we teach with our Rubble deescalation that, especially for someone who's in psychosis, someone who's in crisis, or even if they're not in psychosis, someone who's very emotional, only a small percentage of what they perceive is the words that you say. So much of it is the paraverbal, and I haven't done the trainings in a while. The words, paraverbal, and then
Your body language.
And then,
I mean,
body
it's-
language.
I mean, there's a lot of... It's how you communicate outside of exactly what you're saying,
Yeah. Well,
It's in
a lot of
fluctuating
times-
of your voice of certain words that you say,
So and then paraverbal, we explain
how you
is
say
like
it.
how you say it, like the rate of speech. So the example we always give is like, so you can say, I'm not saying Greg is an idiot, but you can also say, I'm not saying Greg is an idiot. I'm not saying Greg is an idiot. I'm saying that he's a jerk or something. So
Yeah.
so much of that, like especially if someone's very emotional, they're not paying so much attention to the content of the words. It's everything else that they're taking in. So it's probably important that you even for your telehealth clients that you ask them to sit a little
Oh, yeah,
further
right
back.
away.
Okay.
Right away.
Wow.
I'm like, I'm going to need you to back it up.
Yeah, the affliction. Yeah, like with
Get more
especially
information
like
that
with your very specific style of intervention, right? Like that somatic, like the somatic part of things, and then like needing to see their body and also feeling their energy. How do you feel like when I know we want to accommodate and everything, but like especially with your side of things, how do you feel when patients are more or clientele are more telecommunicative than in person? Like how is that like a really tricky road for you to navigate with your clients?
It can be for me.
Yeah.
It's tricky for me because of how much I put an importance on energy and feeling them, but they don't know that. They're coming in with their stories, they're coming in with their narrative, they're coming in with their trauma. I'm a trauma therapist, so specifically people are coming in with their traumas, and they're just looking for an opportunity to find some sort of awareness or healing through therapy. They don't know per se that I think it would be better if we're in person. They don't know that. And so I just meet them where they're at and I go as best as I can. I get up in the middle of my telehealth sessions. I ask them to sit back. I ask them to notice what they're feeling in their bodies. I get a little bit more theatrical, I would say, on telehealth because it's not transferring as much as in person, right?
Yeah. What do you mean you get up? Like
I'll just stand up. In the middle of session, I'll be like, "Oof, what you just said made me need to
Really?
wiggle.
Really?
Oh, let's see what it feels like to wiggle." And like because we're on camera, people feel a little bit more awkward. I always tell them to hide their self view. Hide your self view.
Yeah.
And then I'll be like, "Let's wiggle." And so I'll be wiggling like a crazy person, right? Really flailing my arms about. While in person, I might do a more realistic wiggle.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, "Okay, let's wiggle. Let's move.
Yeah.
Let's roll our shoulders back." Because you're comfortable. You're right next to somebody. But on camera, I really need to make them feel comfortable. So I go above and beyond in my gestures. If they say something that's really big or, great examples if a client maybe had a trauma where they wanted to run away when the trauma initially happened. In person, I will have my client get up. Not have them. I'll invite them to get up and walk out of the therapy room in the middle of the session. So we'll start processing the trauma. Halfway through, the point of which, when it happened, they wanted to get up, I say, "Now let's see what this feels like. Let's get up. And do you want me to come with you or do you want to go on your own?" And most of the time they say, "Come with me." And we'll get up together and we'll walk around. I have a rather large office space as well as in the kind of walkabout outside of my office. And we'll just pace. And then when they feel regulated again, we'll sit down and then we'll notice what that felt like. And we'll do that several times. Now, in telehealth, that's a little awkward. But I'll walk out of frame. I'll be like, "Come on, let's walk out of frame together. Let's see what that feels like." Walk into your kitchen. I'll invite people to still get that experience as best they can in their home.
You allow them to sort of leave safely and then return safely. So maybe they left their traumatic situation to safety, but then they didn't have that safe invite back. So that's probably really like a really powerful healing.
And here's where the benefit of telehealth is: people feel more safe in their home. Half of my work in the beginning of getting a new client is, and I tell my clients this, we have to build a container. Like y'all would have noticed when I came over, I took off my shoes, I sat on your couch. I was really making myself comfortable. We had tea, because we have to build a container. Otherwise, we're not connected.
Yeah, for sure.
And so much of that in person takes place through building rapport, building the container, them just habituating to the parking situation in downtown Seattle. Them getting used to my front desk people, them getting used to the sound of, all the stuff. So that takes a while. Versus telehealth, they're comfortable. And now we're building the container between us, not environmental.
Building that container, I haven't heard that before. That's a really powerful concept. You definitely set me at ease when you sat on the couch, cross-legged. You were super comfortable.
Absolutely.
Like I have a little social anxiety, and you're a guest, and I want to provide like we all want to provide like a welcoming situation for you. So that the fact that you were so at ease set me at ease. So yeah, maybe we should. I mean, you set out the donuts and a really nice spread.
Yeah,
so
the donuts did it.
That was a nice touch.
We all got our dopamine hit and we feel better.
But yeah, I kind of do want to focus more on that, and for future guests, like how can we build a container so that they feel relaxed and welcome?
Next time, Greg will be cross-legged on the couch.
Oh, yeah,
Well, I like
Sip my tea.
the idea of that too, like the visual of building, like, I really like how you're putting it, building a container where you, instead of building an environment, because the environment already exists, but building a container or like a safe place for that person to have these like hard conversations and these communications. Because like therapy is in itself, like we've talked about this in past, is like therapy in itself is, there's some anxiety that fits in there because you're about to go share with a stranger, though you're about to pay them, which is fair, but like they're still a stranger. You're about to go share a lot of intimate details with them about yourself. And then you're also like, we were talking about it, and we've talked about it kind of in meditation. You're about to go do some uncomfortable shit, and you're about to go dive deep. Hopefully, because that's the intention of therapy, you're about to go dive deep into things that you've been not wanting to dive deep into, right? So like creating that safe place where like you have this little border and you're good here. I think that's really, really cool that you put it in those terms of like building the space for
container,
them.
yeah.
You
I
said
like
it
that.
perfectly, that they're worried about talking about the difficult things. They're worried about getting into the difficult. And there's one aspect I think that might have been forgotten is they're worried about what you're thinking about them.
Yeah.
I did forget that, and you're
It's
correct.
huge.
Yeah, because we all
Judgment.
whether you're paid or not, we're still worried about that judgment of like, oh, this person's gonna think I'm crazy,
Or just we want to.
like even therapist or not, you're like,
The way you
she gonna
whisper
have some
that.
stories about me later.
The way you whisper that made me think you're crazy.
Little bit.
Very close to my ears. So there was something that Nick said that I want to sort of touch back on, so we can work our way to sort of the main topic for today, which
I'm
will be
so excited
on
for the
meditation.
topic.
Okay. So Nick was talking about how someone might be jiggling their foot. You say, "Hey, I noticed that you're jiggling your foot when we enter this difficult topic," and then they say, "Oh, it means nothing." And then what Nick's point was that they may not realize that it signifies something specific. So this a lack of awareness of how your body language or your movements or your tics or whatever stems from some inner state or from some emotional reaction to something. How can a person cultivate that inner awareness?
What a beautiful question.
Oh, thank you.
Do you just tap yourself on the back after you ask questions like that?
No, I just massage my aching neck from all the gaming and phones.
You game? What do you
Yeah.
game?
I'm a big fan of like Witcher 3 and Elden Ring.
Ooh,
and, yeah,
okay.
I like Yakuza, like open world action RPGs.
Little smile on his
Nice.
face.
Did you
as he
see
said
my
that.
Triforce?
Oh, hell yeah. Good for
Yeah,
you.
Zelda. I'm
Zelda
playing
fan?
Red Dead Redemption 2 right now for the first time.
Okay, another
That's a
great
great
open
one.
world
That's a great
kind of
one.
action
That's a
RPG.
good game.
One.
That's a
Hell
good
yeah.
one.
Arthur Morgan and me are
Yeah.
like this. But what a fantastic question. So I ask people in the beginning, I say, "Oh, it means nothing. My foot is tapping." And I say, "Okay, let's look at it this way. Are you thirsty right now?"
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
How do you know?
I feel it in my throat.
Oh, nice. So you do feel your throat.
I do feel.
Okay. You do. That's not on par with the men I know.
Try to feel.
And then I say, are you hungry right now? Right.
Okay, no.
Are you horny right now?
Pass.
But these are great markers to start with. If you know you're thirsty because there's a dryness of the mouth, there's maybe a sting in the back of your throat. You're hungry because there's emptiness. Maybe there's even growling. Maybe there's just the thoughts about eating. You're horny for men and women for different ways, but we don't need to go into it. But when you know, right? Those are all body indicators that are really, really obvious. But you can start there. Ask yourself throughout the day, am I thirsty? Am I hungry? Shoot, if you want to, am I horny? Like, ask yourself those big ones. And then you can start diving down even deeper and deeper, which is, am I comfortable? And then how do I know? And that's the follow-up. So am I this and how do I know? Am I comfortable? Yes. Okay, how do I know? Well, my heart's not beating as fast as it was when we started, I can tell you that. And I feel more authentic. I feel more flowy. I'm moving a little bit. I just feel like, there you go.
Yeah.
That's it. You just warm it. You foreplay with the idea. A lot of sexual innuendos.
Well, yeah, sexuality is a part
Just
of
being
us.
in touch with those feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little checklists,
Mm-hmm.
like personal checklists. Do you encourage all of your clients to have these little check-ins with themselves, like these little personal check-ins and these list of like throughout their day when they feel something change, like biochemistry or whatnot, feeling themselves change, like going through this little personal checklist of with themselves in those moments?
Sure, yeah. And can you help me with, what do you mean by encourage?
Like giving them like homework to do. You know what I mean?
That's
like,
why I asked.
Yeah, giving them like little homework to do because like obviously therapy is really easy to. No, I shouldn't say really easy because it's not. But therapy is easier to do in the moment with a therapist by the side. But it's that homework that's like hard because no one's checking in with you, right? Therapy is already a personal thing and it's already like a private thing, right? But then if we, it's the going home and trying this to do first, you know what I mean? Like try to work on this aspect of things that is harder to do. And like, I was just wondering for your clients and like with your style of therapy, do you give them those kind of checklists to do when they're out and about in everyday life of like, is this situation making me feel anxious and why is it making me feel anxious?
Yeah, I mean, repetition is so important. We all know that. We've heard it takes 10,000 hours to master anything. I believe it's less than that, but I don't do homework because I think it speaks for itself. And so
Okay.
what I do is in session, I'm consistently asking those questions.
Checking in.
Always.
Oh.
What are you feeling? How do you know? What are you feeling? How do you know? It's so much that it becomes their therapy experience.
Okay.
Their mental health experience is a lot to do with what their therapy experience is. And at that point, it is, this girl asks me nonstop, what am I feeling and how do I know? And I hope that they notice the difference. And I know they will. And so it speaks for itself. It doesn't need to be assigned. Sure, there are some clients that it would benefit if they did it more outside, but I am on their time and their pace.
Okay.
And if I say, go home and do this, we get into this hierarchical, top down, I'm giving you homework style that I don't believe in as much as I do. We all have our, not to get too hippie here, but we all have our Buddha nature. We all have our own time and pace. If it's working for you, you're going to end up doing it outside of this.
Rather than a requirement.
Yeah, totally. Are you also trying to get them to change their verbiage?
Yes,
Or,
that I do.
Yeah, like with how you're just saying like checking in with themselves and like I'm feeling this.
Yeah.
Instead of like, well, this makes me feel.
I did it with you already.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Oh,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. It happens. Verbiage is a very important thing. Okay.
Dylan said he had bad ADHD, and what was the word you used? Strong.
I said strong.
Strong.
Let's use
Strong
strong
ADHD.
instead.
I said no,
He's
you have
it's
strong.
strong, real
Yeah,
strong.
well, my ADHD powers, as if anybody who knows me is, I have a very strong superpower of ADHD.
ADHD man.
Well, I mean, that's personally like one thing, if we're talking about verbiage and this ADHD lovely thing, one thing very important, because like my mom instilled that on me, where like when I was diagnosed with ADHD, it was like, this is not a crutch for you. Like, this is not a like, oh, you can't do this because you're ADHD. Like, that's not what this is going to be. And she was very adamant about that.
Nice.
But for me personally, and like the way I always started changing it very early on in my life was it's a superpower. It's not a disorder. Like obviously for the DSM and for everything else, we need to call it a disorder. I feel like, I don't know. I don't agree with that.
It's just the way your mind works.
Yeah, exactly. It's attention deficit hyperactive. Just stop with that. The disorder part, I don't think needs to be there because it's a superpower. If you use it to your advantage, you can multitask. You have a lot of different interests. You can be good at a lot of different things.
Situational awareness.
Yeah, you have an intense situation awareness. You have intense emotional awareness. And you're very empathetic to people because you have ADHD. That's a superpower in my book. That's how I say that, and that's how I'm going to finish that statement.
I like it.
Yeah.
So you help your clients, you encourage them to rephrase certain things so it's more positive or more...
For that example, let's say my client said I have really bad ADHD, and then they would, probably from their ADHD, just keep talking, and I'd be like, wait. How did it feel to say that? I have really bad ADHD. And I purposely slow down my cadence so that they are tuning in to their feelings. Maybe the client says, I don't know. I mean, it's just true. It just sucks. Oh, it sucks. What does that mean?
How did I feel to say that?
How did it feel to say that?
Yeah.
Well, it sucks. I mean, it's just bad. It feels bad. Oh, well, what's bad mean? And now we're breaking it open.
Where do you feel the badness in your body?
Boom. Are you sure you're not therapist?
I mean,
Aspiring.
These I've been exposed to some of these principles. So you're even when you're helping your clients to rephrase what they're saying, it still comes back to this check in with the body, check in with the emotions, and the emotions reside in the body. And isn't the majority of the serotonin in our body in the gut anyway?
In our gut, yeah.
So we feel it like in
90%.
90%? Oh my God.
Whoa.
Yeah. So like the gut brain is like way more vast in some ways than, well, I shouldn't say it's more vast. The gut brain is vast. And so when your clients are doing these check-ins, they're automatically, or like you're encouraging them to attune their attention to their bodies.
Yeah, that 90% of your neurotransmitters are in your gut.
Okay.
In your gut.
Wow.
And so you really got to be paying attention to the body more than the mind. And the mind is just a guide to put the words to what the body is feeling.
Now, people might hear that, and so we will get to meditation. I know I've already said that a couple times. People will hear that that we want to pay more attention to the body than to the mind, and they'll say, wait, but like the contents of thoughts are important. Like, what are you talking about? But I just from my experience, the more I just think about thinking about, like that is a rabbit hole that goes straight down to anxiety, negativity, and like I do most of my sort of busy mind thinking like at night, especially after a long gaming session. Like you asked me what games I like. I'm currently playing Valheim, and that's sort of the main game that I'm playing with my friend Bree. And a lot of Valheim is like resource management, and like I gotta like make sure they get enough iron so that I can forge this sword. Then I gotta upgrade it, and like how am I gonna divvy up the resources? And we gotta
Busy man.
Yeah, so it'll be like at night I'll have finished a gaming session in Valheim, and I'll just be like laying in bed thinking about the game, and like this attention to thought is not helpful. Whereas when so I'll be laying, and this is something that we've talked about a little bit, when I realize that it's been like an hour and I've just been laying in bed thinking about the game, just thinking about thinking, I decide, no, I'm going to pay attention to the breath. And then once I bring my awareness back to the breath, I'm usually asleep within like 10, 15 minutes. And that's like that. It's so much more helpful to attend to the body than it is to, like, I can tell myself I should stop thinking, but that doesn't help. I need to focus on something else, and something in the body is like way more helpful for that. So that was a bit of a rant. I didn't mean to go on a whole resource management Valheim kick, but
Well, that's got to be huge for your clients. Like initially, I just myself, when you're shooting questions and everything like that, I'm like, oh man, oh okay, it's kind of a shock, in a sense. So I imagine that's going to be for a lot of clients who haven't practiced that before.
You're saying how does that feel?
Yeah, how does that feel?
Yeah.
Well, why does it make you feel? How do you feel with this? Or how do you, even being, pay attention to things of the body with the breath and everything. That's not something I'm used to doing.
Right.
Especially in those states when I'm trying to like reduce anxiety or.
But then you're my favorite client.
Yeah, right.
I'm
Because it's got to be a world opening.
It's I imagine it must be the same with personal trainers where, if somebody's coming in real bad shape, real having a hard time, the opportunity is so wide. There's so much. Even having that client that says, no, my foot twitches and it means nothing, a year in saying, so my boss called and I immediately knew I was angry because my jaw was clenching. And so I picked up the phone. That those moments are one of my favorite. This happens
when they're not even aware that they're describing a breakthrough. They're just saying like, oh yeah, my boss called me and I was angry. That immediate attention to their own emotional state, you probably can give yourself a little pat on the back.
My clients do this all the time. It's so cute. They'll go, so I was feeling, and then they'll go to explain a thought.
Starts with the feeling.
But they'll go, no, so I was feeling, and then they go to explain a thought, and then they'll go, oh wait, that's not a feeling, that's a thought. Because we've trained ourselves so much to know now, like thoughts and feelings are different. And if you're going to say I'm feeling something, like I'm feeling calm right now, that's a feeling. But saying I'm feeling like this is actually going really well, like we're having good dialogue already, I'm excited.
That is a
excited was a feeling, but everything else was just thoughts. And so frequently we're doing that, especially in couples. That's where you really see it. I feel like you don't do the dishes. I'm like, that's not a feeling.
Yeah, that's a thought. That's an opinion. I love that you just broke those apart, right? Because like personally, I've had to do that work in itself, right? It's hard. With like my own therapist back in the day, it was like that was one thing that I had to do because I would always be like, yo, I'm angry right now. It goes, okay, cool. So that is an emotion, but that's a masking emotion. Like, let's talk about why are you angry, and like let's break angry apart, because as a recovering addict, I got two emotions that I'm really good at, and those are the two I like: happiness and pissed off. That's where I'm at, right? I don't like working around the other ones. I hate them. And in my sobriety, like becoming sober, I've learned to manage and deal with the other emotions, and that they're just part of life. And I have to be okay with being sad every once in a while. I have to be okay with my anxiety, because like I didn't know I had that until I sobered up. But
because the alcohol was
the drugs and alcohol were 100% masking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. Cocaine is great at not making you feel anxious.
Oh wow.
Yeah, you just feel really happy, right?
Very temporarily.
30 minutes.
At great cost.
Yeah, and it's really destructive, because then you can't regulate your emotions ever. Like when you are sober, you're always looking for that next fix, for that next something to not make you feel shitty, right?
Yeah. I heard a great definition of addiction, which it was that your presence is so uncomfortable that anything you're addicted to is better than it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful analogy, and I would have to agree with that. Like it is shitty being yourself, so you have to escape from that, right? Or you feel that it is really shitty being yourself or who you are, so you have to escape that somehow. And the substances are your escape, right? And for me, growing up, especially like early 90s, early 2000s, growing up in that era, where ADHD was still kind of like this new-ish aspect of life, and like people didn't really understand it. And it was more like, oh, you're just a loud, obnoxious kid. We need to hide you somewhere. It was this shameful kind of thing, right, that I had to deal with, where I'm like, oh, I'm just obnoxious. Let me take this to help me be more relatable, right? But, and going into that tangent goes to this is like, I wanted to ask you about mindfulness and like meditation and motion, because when I did sober up, that's what really benefited me personally. Is I could not do meditation sitting still, right?
Yeah.
Like I've always struggled with it. I've struggled with the way my mind works in that space and how it is very the other day I actually related it, because like you always hear people talk about like the spider web, like with people who have ADD and like their brain. The best way I feel like mine is, it's like an orbit. Like I have a thought that hits me and then it just goes whoop, out into the orbit, and it comes back around at some point. And then it's there and then it disappears again and it's in orbit. So I just got all these thoughts in orbit, right? But for me, it makes it really, really hard to sit and meditate. But when I'm on my bike or when I'm in the middle of a river or when I'm hiking and I'm in a natural space, that's where I find a lot of peace, and that's where I find a lot of ability to have these thoughts and also be able to store them and or accept them. And I just wanted to like have you like see your perspective on that and like what your thoughts are on that.
You bring up such an interesting, this is perfect segue into what today's topic is, because I arrived in Portland last night, and because it's Portland, it was raining.
Yes.
And so I was walking to go get dinner, and I had my notebook in one of my hands, and I was thinking about today's podcast, and I was thinking about meditation. And I recognized I was starting to feel sort of irritated while I was thinking about it. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, why am I irritated right now? And I would think it was because of the rhetoric that there is about meditation, about it being this peaceful, relaxing, sit in lotus position, calm. And I'm so tired of hearing about the benefits of meditation. I'm just done. And I was thinking this as I was walking. And then I was reminded of this incredible research study done in 2010 by Killingston and Gilbert, where they took 2,200 adults and they had an app put on their phone where it would ping them throughout the day. And it would say, what are you currently doing? Second question would be, what are you currently thinking about? And the third question was, how happy are you? And not surprisingly, people are often not thinking about what they're doing. 46% of the time, we're not thinking about what we're doing. But what I found so fascinating about the study was that the times that we are the happiest is when we are thinking about what we are doing.
Interesting.
Which is crazy.
That's very
Like,
interesting.
what if I'm like, my job in an office and I hate my job, but I'm thinking about my vacation with my spouse next week? You'd think I would be happier, but you're not. You're happier when you're paying attention to what you're doing. So I thought about that study and I'm like, this is pretty meta. I'm thinking about tomorrow while walking. This is silly. Let me, and this is a word in as meditation instructors we teach, let me drop in. So I dropped in.
The opposite of dropping out.
So I dropped in and I recognized that the hand that was holding the notebook was soaking wet and cold because it had been raining, and I was holding my notebook on the way to dinner. And I recognized that the hood I was wearing that was cloth was wet, so the top of my head was damp. And I was paying attention to all of these things going on. And then, not to go from one kind of story to the next, but the Buddha has this great parable where there's a turtle and a fox, and they meet in the forest. And the fox sees the turtle and goes, dinner. And the turtle sees the fox and goes, oh my gosh, a fox. Like, I got to get away.
Danger.
Yeah. And then the turtle's like, well, I'm not very fast, so I shouldn't run. So instead, the turtle goes into its shell, and the fox circles it for a while and gets bored and leaves. And the Buddha says, whenever there is a fox in your life, whether that be anxiety or depression or addiction, to go inward, to be like the turtle. And it's not always going to be pleasant. And so you're speaking about walking meditations. That walking meditation for me was not pleasant. My hand was cold. My head was cold. And I also recognized irritation when I went in. But I was being like the turtle. I was going inward. And that is meditation. And that is what is not out in mainstream media enough, is you can be meditating when you are standing in the line at the grocery store. In fact, those are some of the most beautiful ones. Or doing the dishes. That is meditation. That is.
Yeah, that idea is so new to me. You know, even meditation in motion. Like when we talked about it before, I was like, I never really thought it. Like when I used to bowl, right?
Yeah.
I bowled for several years, and I used to go after work. You know, I'd work 80-hour weeks, and I would just go bowl by myself. 4 or 5 games before I did league. And now that I look back and think about it, that was really my meditation. That
Yeah.
was when I felt at peace, you know.
You were only thinking
Or-
about bowling while you were
Mhm.
bowling. That's an example where you were in that. I mean,
Yep.
I hesitate to use the word flow state. I'm not sure if a flow state is actually a thing, but you were fully attending to what you were doing as opposed to thinking about the million things that
Yep.
make you
Which is
sad
super
and
rare
anxious.
for me because
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
mind just is very scattered
Yeah,
most of the
yeah.
time.
Well, I would say that's part of the flow state, not to take away from what you're saying, but I would love, because like I've done a good amount of research on the flow state. That's a
I
very
haven't.
big topic in the recreation world.
Okay.
Is the flow state, and that's a whole nother episode
Sure,
we could
sure,
talk about. But that right there is like, that's pure mindfulness of being in the moment. You're in the moment. You're not somewhere else. So like, I would say like something that people who do have ADD and ADHD struggle with a lot of times is being in the moment of where we are, because we have so many other things that are stimulating and we are always chasing that dopamine, right? We're always going mining. But with like the flow state, that's exactly why I think for me, it's so much easier to get into certain states when I'm mountain biking or running or, the runner's high, right? And like getting in those places is because what we do, we call that the flow states, when you're in this state of almost pure euphoria where you're not thinking, your body is just doing what it needs to do and you're in sync. And like for, when I'm downhilling, you're going anywhere from 20 plus miles an hour down a mountainside on windy ass trails with rocks and boulders. There's times when you're not thinking about that. You're not like, oh shit, I got to hit my brakes.
No.
Now I have to do this. No, your body is just all of a sudden in 2.5 minutes, you're at the bottom all of a sudden. You're like, oh shit,
Yeah.
that happened. And you just feel great, and you don't have to think about, you're not thinking about the trees that are coming and the rocks and the next turn. You're just flowing through whatever is happening. And it's hard to get into that state in regular life, I will say. But like when you have a day where you go through the entire day and then you get home, you're like, cool, that was cool. We're done. I don't get many of those days, but those days are amazing.
Yeah. Well, when you're having that experience, or Nick, when you were bowling, you're in, maybe we could call a mindful state, because you're present in the moment. You're doing what you're doing. You're only doing what you're doing. You're only thinking about what you're doing, as opposed to half-heartedly doing one thing and then busy in anxious thoughts. So one way to cultivate a state of mindfulness is to do things that you love, that fully engage you. In a situation like mountain biking, you actually have a responsibility for your safety to not distract yourself with other thoughts. Because if while you're like very carefully navigating the slope, if you start thinking about what you're gonna have for dinner, or you start thinking about the awkward thing that you said to your coworker yesterday, you might lose focus, and then your safety.
Oh, it doesn't end well.
And then your safety.
It does not end well.
So
But go ahead.
yeah. So that's one way to enter a mindful state. At the martial arts school that I trained at back east, called Blue Dragon School of Martial Arts, a place that changed my life. Beautiful, wonderful place. Shout out to Sifu Ales. We meditated at the beginning of every class, and we would there was a weekly meditation session that he would there was a lecture, kind of like a Dharma talk. It was like internal Chinese martial arts, so he was coming more from a Taoist perspective. But so we would meditate, once a week for 20 minutes, and then we would do a few minutes before every class. And this was seated meditation. We would sit, and he would. And the teacher, either him or one of the senior students, would invite us to go inward and concentrate on the breath, concentrate on a focal point, usually the point between the eyebrows, or a sound. And we would just do that for a few minutes. And that he was very clear that this is mental training. You're doing this to train the mind to be more still.
Yeah.
But we were talking earlier, you feel like, because now we're talking about thoughts versus feelings. You made it, you indicated that you think describing meditation as something that quiets the mind isn't the best way to think about it.
Yeah.
Say more about that.
Yeah. If I go back to when I first started my practice, I would sit and then I'd be like, okay, I'm supposed to be quieting my mind. And then it wouldn't work. And I hear this all the time. So I'm bad at meditation. And I really, really want to get the point across that is not the point. You're not aiming to quiet your mind. In some disciplines you are. But what I want to open the door to is this, and I'm not the only one doing this, but is this satipatthana, right? Attention to inside, Sanskrit for paying attention to inside. Just noticing what's going on inside without attempting to change it. Just seeing. So this, I want to get good at concentrating attention is great and very profound, and it does work. And we do need to work on our attention, of course. But what about working on finding out who you are? What about listening to your thoughts on a regular basis and learning the way that you think? because we don't do that. We just wander through life with thousands and thousands of thoughts a day and just move unconsciously through
or distract ourselves from our own thoughts.
most of the time that. And I'm like, but what about slowing down and thinking about who am I? Let me learn who I am. And approaching meditation as the opportunity to learn who am I through this silent breaks that I take. And how does my brain work? Oh, I notice I'm thinking about that weird thing I said to my coworker. Oh, I was thinking about that yesterday too. Gosh, I'm kind of a ruminator. Woof, now I have some information about myself.
And that's a breakthrough.
It's a breakthrough.
Realizing that you're a ruminator is a breakthrough.
It's a breakthrough.
And so the training, you do consider sitting meditation like a form of mental training?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
But it's a different training. It's a training of discipline, and it's a training of willingness. I love this question. I ask clients all the time. I say, is there one thing that you would like to accomplish before you die? And often people say, I'd love to learn an instrument. It's kind of a common one.
Yeah.
And so I'll, explore this for a bit with them, what have it. And then later on in the session, or maybe even a session or two later, I'll say, how do you feel about being really bad at something? I go, I hate it. How do you feel looking stupid? Oh, I hate it. And I keep going down this list. How does it feel feeling insignificant, insufficient? How does those feelings arrive in your body and in your life? Oh, I freak out or whatever. And I say, well, then, you might not actually want to learn to play the piano. And I've got this answer a couple times. Well, no, I just wish that I learned it when I was a kid.
I have said that.
And I'm like, well, the reason why you want to learn it since you were a kid is because you're hoping that those feelings of being insignificant, insufficient, failure, disappointment, they're just far away. They're not here now. And this is a terrible travesty for living life if you're consistently staying away from things that you're going to be bad at, or that you're worried about being insufficient within. Then you're not going to live the life that you want. And those dreams that you have written down will never come to fruition if you're not willing to sit. So meditation is less about, let me become less anxious or let me become super spiritual guru, and more about, let me discipline myself to being okay at being bad at something and being okay at being insignificant, because you will find out how insignificant you are when you meditate, and it widens you. Or let me realize all of these bad pieces of myself, and let me sit at the stool, the piano analogy, let me sit at the stool and be bad at something for a really long time, but still keep doing it.
So with that, especially folks or clients that have kind of that block and are novice in that, where do you usually start? Like, what do you have them kind of start with?
2 minutes.
Yeah.
2 minutes of what
like
exactly?
Internal, just kind of like silence and breathing and,
Sit.
Yeah.
And then I'll pop in and say, what you thinking about? Notice what you're thinking about. Usually at the minute mark. And then 2 minutes after, I say, all right, tell me everything you thought. Everything.
Yeah. Because 2 minutes is a long time. A long time with the silence.
2 minutes alone with yourself.
Yeah.
Do you give them a little basic instruction, like to sit with their breath, pay attention to the breath?
So client specific,
Yeah.
Depends on what they're coming in with and their level of willingness to the practice. But in general, I think it's better to raw dog it, to go back to the sexual independence. Better to just raw dog the experience and, learn. Just don't be afraid to learn. So I'll say, let's try it. 2 minutes sit. And, set an alarm on your phone that is not jarring, and sit and see. And I guarantee, if anybody listening paused this right now and sat for 2 minutes, they'd see some shit.
Well, I like to, before we started, when we did that kind of little meditation session, but where you talked about having a focal point, and I liked how when you kind of halfway through, you're like, if you lost that focal point, find it again. Because at that point I was like, oh, well, I definitely did. Found it again, but I really liked that 100%. Because it did bring me back to center a little bit.
Yeah. I did. That was very enjoyable. We all did a little mini meditation before we started filming, and that was very, very enjoyable. So I really appreciate that. And also, like, going back to what I was asking about with meditation and motion, like with your clientele that you're doing this with, like that are having struggle with sitting meditations, right? With those 2 minutes and whatnot. How do you circumnavigate that? And like, do you have them get up and try working around or like walking around in meditation, or like how do you navigate that complexity with your clientele?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
I had a great, it's so hard to not pull from client experiences, which it's true. I had one specific client that I really did a great walking meditation with as we were trauma processing. And that is, and now that I say it out loud, I realize I've had many trauma processing walking meditations that are good, but this one was this aha moment, because what we would do is we would walk, and then as soon as we were discussing the trauma, and as soon as the trauma got a little bit too big, we would walk slower and see what that feels like. And then we would continue once the heart rate was down, and then we would walk faster. So we're playing with the somatic indications of heartbeat, breath, the feet, the way, how planted do you feel when you're stepping? Are you stepping mostly on your toes? So we're bringing mindfulness into the trauma story. And that person would not have got as much from trauma reprocessing in a sitting meditation.
Yeah.
They just wouldn't have. And they needed the movement. And I was willing to, my office is right by a park, so I have the incredible opportunity of having a walking path right by my office. And when it's nice, and if people want that, and absolutely walk it out.
Yeah, that's and one of the reasons I asked you is like one thing that one practice that I really resonate with is Shinryoku, which is forest bathing and walking, and essentially exactly that. You literally aimlessly walk in a forest, and that's the intention, is that you are not specifically locking on to like one thought, but you are with intention. You are unintentionally wandering in the woods, and just being in that natural space.
Your intention is to wander aimlessly in the woods. Okay.
Yeah. And that's where like what Nick was just saying, and like kind of what we've been talking about too, is like personally, like when we talk about meditation, obviously it's really hard to not think about it personally in like my personal relationship with meditation. But like that's where when I'd go fly fishing, right? Like walking out, I deliberately hike a lot of places, right? So like walking out to find the river, standing in the river and breathing with the water that's flowing by me, and feeling that water flow through me, and essentially, metaphorically washing whatever I have going on.
But you could get that during the dishes.
Yeah, see,
you could be
that's
washing
hard
the
for me to
dishes with
picture.
warm water.
That's amazing you say that, because no, I cannot.
You can, though. You can. The Buddha says he says, be Buddha when you're going to the bathroom. Calls to nature. He says, be Buddha when you're talking to your friend. Be Buddha at all times. You can have that at all times.
Okay.
Washing your hands. Just imagine it's the same as that river is flowing, but there's warm water. Maybe it hits your wrist a little bit. Maybe the suds of the soap are getting larger and larger as you're moving, and then notice what happens. You can get that at all times.
Yeah. So you're kind of talking about essentially being extremely aware of your daily.
It's got to be such a practice, because that's so hard for me to wrap my mind around.
I think that is what it comes down to. Like the more mindfulness training you do, whether it's with a therapist or with a teacher, like there's a great place in Portland called the Portland Insight Meditation Center. That's just like the guy who runs it. I'm not sure if he runs it, but the guy who did the Dharma talk when I was there is just the most incredible speaker. And so just being there and listening to him talk puts me in a mindful state. And that is part of the training for me, because then it's easier for me once I leave the center, it's easier for me to drop into that mindful state. But it does take training. I want to get into this sort of, I'm not sure if it's a disagreement or this difference of perspective between like it is Dylan saying that it's easier for him to drop into a mindful state when he's in nature. And what you're saying is that you can just as easily drop in that mindful state while doing the dishes. And so we might bridge that gap. I just want to, I'm not sure if this disclaimer is necessary, but any mindfulness practice can be fully secular. Like you have maybe kind of a Buddhist tilt to your...
That is where I got my education from, yeah.
Because Naropa is a Buddhist university?
Buddhist university,
okay.
yeah.
So you've
gone to Vipassana and stuff, so that's where my energy's at.
Vipassana retreat? And Vipassana is like Buddhist mindfulness
Silent
meditation?
retreats, yeah.
Okay. So you've kind of been brought up in a Buddhist tradition. I don't know how Taoism fit into the meditation practice I did with my old school, but there was definitely some like Taoist like cosmology and like theory in our practice. But any mindfulness practice can be secular. It doesn't have to be part of a religious tradition or even a spiritual tradition. So I just kind of want to say that. I'm not sure if it was necessary to say, but so at the Blue Dragon School of Martial Arts, every fall we would do a fall retreat where we would go and stay at a retreat center that was near the woods, and then we would all kind of disperse into the woods the first day and find a sit spot. And so our Sifu believed that nature is just powerful for calming the mind, in Taoist cosmology and practice, there's a deep connection between like chi and the natural world. Like Sifu would talk about how chi comes from like the earth and from the grass, and he encouraged us to spend 15 minutes a day barefoot on the grass, to go to the coast, and the water gives chi, mountains give chi. And so I don't know where I stand on the sort of the metaphysics of that, or if there's like, because there's kind of some supernatural stuff in like Taoist legends and stuff. So I don't know where I come down on that, but I have felt a strong calming energy from being outside. So can you just briefly talk about connection, if any, between mindfulness practice and nature?
And I think what we're getting into is exactly those conversations of meditation that I think I was feeling that level of towards, because it makes it sound like you must go on retreat or you must be in nature. What I'm getting at is that if we reframe what meditation is and reframe its purpose as, I'm not going to get rid of my addiction or my anxieties or my depression, I'm going to know myself and to live my life.
I think that's a better. I'm sorry, please continue.
No, you're good. Yeah.
I think that is a better approach. And actually, I'm not sure if it was in a Huxley book or if, because Aldous Huxley is my favorite author, and he was really ahead of his time talking about mindfulness. But the idea that having a goal-oriented meditation practice really kind of dilutes it, or having that goal in mind while you're practicing is going to make it harder to drop into that mindful state. The state won't be as deep. Does that resonate?
Yeah, that's kind of what just be with yourself. Understand that as I'm doing the dishes, I am me. And this is the only, for everyone listening, like, you are you. And there's this great meditation I do all the time called This Is My Life. And it's a transcendental, and for types of meditation, transcendental means typically a mantra meditation. And so I go over and over, this is my life. This is my life.
Wow.
This is my life for 20 minutes.
Wow.
And it's emotional and intense. And sometimes I'm not happy with this is my life. Sometimes I say it like, this is my life.
Well, I guess it's my life.
But that is just me in a room doing the dishes thinking, this is my life. This is about building my me. And that's what I want meditation to be for people, is it's building your you. You don't have to run away to retreat. You don't need to be listening. You just need to build
I do dishes way more often than
yes.
a retreat.
And you brush your teeth, brush your teeth. And really a great Buddhist practices Buddhism while brushing their teeth. Brush your teeth and notice your teeth and say, these are my teeth.
Noticing the sensations of the toothbrush as it kind of like goes across the tooth. Like the more, I feel a pretty like obvious benefit the instant that I start paying attention to the micro level like that. I just feel good when I'm like, I'm showering, and like I've just, when I'm in the shower, I'm usually lost in thought, but I notice I'm like, oh, I can just like pay attention.
And that's why I encourage people to say, pay attention and say, this is my arm.
Yeah, this is my arm.
This is my arm.
This is the soap. This is my arm.
This is my ears listening. Yeah. This is my voice. I was teased so much growing up about my voice. I used to try and make it go higher. It was this terrible thing. It was the worst. Like, everyone would call me a boy. And now I've spent so much time in meditation where I'm like, this is my voice. This is my eyes. This is my tummy. Right? And just address that this is you. And sit in you. And if you do experience anxiety and you're in meditation and you're like, oh my God, my brain is going crazy. Oh, I hate this. I'm terrible. Oh, can you notice that you're talking about you that way?
It's that acceptance too of just who you are.
You got to flip that. And first, what I recommend my clients do when they get into meditation, even my friends, they say, I can't do it. It's so hard, or I'm so mean to myself. And I say, take a month and try. Just observe how you talk in your meditation. So sit for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever's your flavor, and notice your thoughts. If you can, and you really want to be cool, journal about it. Awkward thing I said to my coworker. Next day, awkward thing I said to my coworker. 3 days later, mom, this, that. And after a month, you're going to have a lot of data. Okay? You can look at your notebook and go, wow, I think about other people a lot. If you're doing that in meditation, you're doing that when you're unaware as well.
Definitely.
So you are wandering around life thinking about what other people are thinking about you all the time. And some people say, I already know I'm doing that. I don't need meditation to figure that out. And I say, well, how are you doing it?
Yeah.
And they go, well, blah, blah, blah. And I say, how do you know you're doing that? There's so much more going on behind the scenes than you're aware of. You don't know you because you're not spending time with you.
Yeah.
And knowing yourself, I think, is an important prerequisite for healing. Like I have healing to do. There's healing that I need to do, and my mindfulness training has really helped me make progress in that journey, because there were so many things that I was just hurting myself constantly, wounding myself every time I don't know if you listened to our stigma episode, but every time I would leave a grocery store, I would just fist clench, teeth bared, like so much rage at myself. And yeah, there were definitely some things that were sort of understandably frustrating. Like, Greg, there's certain things you just got to get your shit together. And there's nothing to do or to think about that besides doing it. But in order to get myself to get there, I needed a lot more self-love and self-acceptance.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And after I had a surgery a year ago, a little over a year ago, and during the post-surgery period, I started working with a couple of physical therapists, and one of them did a system of guided meditation called Hakomi, which I hadn't heard of before that point. And man, I hadn't done a one-on-one guided meditation with anyone before. I'd sat in groups before, but this was a conversation. We were both sitting with our eyes closed, and he would guide me. And I didn't realize how much stuff I needed to unearth, and it wasn't enough. And I've been in plenty of therapy, worked with psychotherapists, CBT. It wasn't enough to just talk with someone. I had to be encouraged, forced almost, because I'm paying for this. I got to do this, into that mindful state in order to process what I need to process. There was shit that I didn't realize I was so angry at myself about from high school. A memory from high school. I'm not going to get into it right now. Sorry, everybody. I'm not going to get into it. But there was a memory from high school.
Did you get a wedgie?
No. This was choices. No, this was just a choice that I made. That was a really dumb choice at the time. But at the end of the day, it was just a dumb teenager being a dumb teenager. But I had been kicking myself for that hard for years, feeling like I'd never recover from it. And so, yeah, I needed that. It wasn't enough to just talk. I needed to drop into that mindful state in order to get there. So,
thank you for your vulnerability.
yeah, no problem. I forgot where I was going with that.
No, I think you opened the door. I think vulnerability encourages vulnerability. I had that's what brought me to meditation. I had something happen to me when I studied my undergraduate abroad in Greece, and something happened, and I returned home from my studies, and I wasn't me anymore. And I was living, there's this great quote by a former monk, Jay Shetty. He says, if you do not take the time to reflect, your distractions become your values by default.
That's where I was going.
That's heavy. That's
Yeah,
cool. That's
I
a
like
really cool. I like that.
And so what happened was I wasn't taking the time to reflect, and I came home after a traumatic event, and my distractions became my values. And at the time I was an undergraduate. So, the system in America for undergraduate is party culture, hookup culture. And so I started doing those things, and I was living by my values based on distraction. I wasn't being me. And there's this, this funny kind of oscillation I was living within, because I created this med shed in the backyard. So I would party Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then I would go into the meditation studio that I created on Sunday, and I would sit in meditations for hours, and I would sob, and I would have so much anxiety from the drinking and the partying and the decisions I was making and the classes that I was overwhelmed with, and just my identity in whole. But I wasn't, I kept going, and I kind of kept going, right? And then I was in therapy, and so the med shed started getting cobwebs because I was in therapy. So I assumed I was figuring it all out. Right. And I was telling my therapist time and time again, the problem is the culture. The problem is America. America's the issue. America's the issue. And I kept saying that. And then it took some time and some meditation where I sat down and I really listened. And I said, who are you, sweetie? What's going on? And then this flood came through me where it was, and I'm even getting emotional as I think about it. I just remember this flood coming over me and me being like, oh, you want to be distracted. You're in pain. And when you do this, this, and this, you feel better temporarily, so you're chasing that. And that's what's going on. Yep. And I had been telling my therapist it was America's fault. Right. And she believed me. She was like, you're right, America, this and that, This is like, she was like, oh, and we were going on this rant and talking about how I should move and, even making goals. We were making goals on how to get out of the country, which I ended up doing. So I ended up following this another path out, another way to distract. And it came, years later where I really tuned in and I was like, oh, okay. If I wouldn't have meditated, I would have never known.
Is that how you found Naropa? Is through that very serendipitous, very interesting, interwoven pathway of different calamities and traumas and different ways of figuring those out. Eventually kind of Naropa.
Yeah, so Naropa is my graduate school in Boulder, Colorado. I was at Birthright in Israel.
Okay.
I'm Jewish, and I was sitting with a woman, and we were talking, and she said, I was telling her some stuff, and she says, you should go to Naropa. And we were pulling up to a museum of some sort, and I was like, what's Naropa? And she goes, where you should go.
Yeah, I like that.
That's a very Buddhist answer.
And we got up and like went to the museum. Her name is Hannah. Her and I ended up attending Naropa together.
Way
She's
cool.
now a licensed therapist in the state of Colorado, and she's
Way cool.
why I went.
I love that. Well, and in going into what you were just saying, one, thank you for that vulnerability as well. Like that's heavy, and I find that amazing that that's how you kind of found your track of meditation and why it's so important to you. Because I just resonate with a lot of kind of what you were saying there, where finding that meditation and why you were meditating really helped, because we have this tendency to want to blame exterior circumstances of why we are feeling the way we're feeling or why something's happening in our life. I know personally as an addict, never my problem. It was never my issue. It's the world, or my upbringing did this to me, right? And it wasn't until I started looking at myself, because that's a big part. You know, I don't agree with everything that 12-step programs have, and I'm not downing 12-step programs by any means. If that's what helps you, that's what helps you. That's what helped me in the beginning. I don't do them anymore, but that's one very big aspect of a 12-step program, is looking at yourself and first saying like, yep, I don't have the power to do this. My addictions are more powerful than my willpower at this point.
And so are the stories. The
Yeah.
stories are more powerful than people's willpower.
Yeah.
The stories
And
we create about what's wrong with us.
100%. If when I was using, I could go down a trail of just misery, right? Easily. And it wasn't until sobering up that, and doing that hard work of self-reflection, that I realized what the meditations and different things that I can do to look at myself and accept, be like, yeah, that happened. You know, if that didn't happen, this wouldn't happen, right? And you kind of create this little track of like, yeah, through traumas, you can build this really cool life. You don't have to define yourself by those traumas. And it wasn't until I was in a therapy session with a really amazing therapist that I had, where he's like, Dylan, I get it. You hate emotions. Don't do them all the time. Like, it's a dam, dude. Shut it off, put it on. Like, don't let it overflow. Open it up every once in a while, but you don't have to have those emotions all the time. And I was like, didn't even think about that. Appreciate that. And that's where, when I would meditate, and, I love that you are bringing up that you don't need to go to the woods, that you don't need to go to these sanctuaries for meditation.
You can have a shed in your backyard of your college house.
And I love that. Because
I'm pretty sure there was like a Corona bottle outside of it from me with like a molded lime.
I love that. And see,
Very sacred space.
and for me personally, like, I keep bringing up the woods because for me personally, that's where I find the easiest area, right? And, going off of that, when he mentioned that, I was like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
And I used to make it like a pit stop. If I was like on a bike ride or something, like I would have a pit stop within mile so-and-so where I would get off my bike, I would go sit somewhere, and I would just be in that moment and in that place. And I would open my dam, if you were. And there's been many a times where I've been in the middle of the woods and just tears coming down my face, right?
But then you get to understand why the tears happen. And
Yeah.
this is what meditation does, is
100%.
people have a trauma, and a lot of people share traumas. And so people end up saying, well, this person had this trauma and they felt this way. And they use these sentences that are, it's my dad's fault. My dad abandoned me, so now I have abandonment issues. And that's their sentence. And they come to therapy, they come to therapists like myself and say, my dad abandoned me and I have abandonment issues. And I say, well, tell me about that. But they kind of are using the dialogue that other people have said who have had abandonment issues, and that's what they hold on to. But it's not their unique thoughts. It's not their feelings, because they don't know them, because they haven't sat with them yet. And there is an inexhaustible variety of life. And so your abandonment issues might show up completely different than somebody else's. And if you sit in meditation and you think about your dad that abandoned you, your sentences might sound something like, how could he do that to me at first, which is very common. And so you go to a therapist because you tried it and you say, my thoughts are, how could he do this to me? But the more you sit into meditation, the more you sit in the meditation, the more you sit in meditation, you come to your therapist and you go, I hate him. And I hate all men. Now we're doing work. Now we know what your thoughts are, which are different than what theirs is and what every abandonment dad story is. It's yours. And now we can really target what you feel and think because you took the time to figure it out.
And do you you mentioned journaling a few minutes ago, and that I attached to that because I'm, I can't even draw stick figures, but I'm more of a writer, and I went a long time without writing and just recently started journaling again. I know it's kind of different per person, but do you recommend that, like journaling after a meditation session so that you can kind of look back and see how you were feeling or what you were thinking?
Yeah. How does journaling make you feel when you're doing it?
It's a release, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. It's a way to process the thoughts in a clear way rather than scattered is what it feels like in the
helps
mind.
Me to clarify too, clarify what I'm thinking.
Are you writing or typing?
Writing.
And do you ever reread your journals?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that feel when you do that?
It, again, kind of brings me to the clarity. Yeah, I'm able to process it a lot more or come up with, trends, I guess.
So it feels clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an emotion behind clarifying?
There is. Relief, I would say. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Relief.
Mm-hmm.
How do you like your therapy session?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm just messing with you because you said you
It's a
can't get
better
into
2
emotions.
minutes in meditation. Yeah.
Yeah, look at that.
And it's free.
But, yeah. I know, but I never really thought about that. I never thought that I could sit and try, a meditation session, and then write about it and see how I did feel or what I was able to, and I could kind of see how the growth of that would, go over time.
There's a great meditation I practice daily that I recommend anybody listening does, and it's called free association writing. And I seriously do practice this daily. Grab your laptop. I recommend this actually on a laptop, a keyboard of some sort, just because we're faster with our fingers than we are with our hand. And free association, just whatever comes up. So mine usually looks something like this. I grab my laptop and I'm like, okay, I'm sitting at my laptop now. I'm noticing that I'm typing what I'm typing, and it's really boring typing what I'm typing, and I'm wondering how long I'm going to go. I set my alarm, and I'm curious when my alarm is going to go. I'm also really nervous about my Tuesday at 9 a.m. client because I feel like, and now you notice something slip through. But you just keep going for X amount of time. And then afterwards, you don't always have to read it all the way through. I do. Read it through and notice what you're feeling. Notice what sentences would be, and I use this not literally, but notice which sentences are bolded. Notice which sentences have italics. And why would you place those there? What's there? And there you go. Now you have some more information. And that's a meditation.
There are certain,
especially under this new paradigm, which I hope is coming out clear. Meditation is to get to know yourself.
That's what I was going to say. What I'm hearing from you is that you're not saying that everyone needs to be Buddhist. You're not saying that everyone needs to sit in the lotus pose. Not everybody needs to go to retreat. But if you want to heal using psychotherapy, mindfulness as like a treatment modality is the most important. Is it the most important prerequisite for you? It's very important, but like, I don't want to put pressure
there was
on
a
you,
research study done that showed that journaling was more effective than cognitive behavioral therapy. That's on my just plugging myself here. That's on my TikTok page at Therapy Jessa.
plug away. Yeah.
Just plugging.
Yeah,
At Therapy Jessa on TikTok. But there's a research study that showed that journaling was more effective than cognitive behavioral therapy. So I don't know to say what's most important, mindfulness or journaling, but I think for life, the most important aspect of life is to get to know yourself, period.
Well, I've heard a similar motto, or the most important thing in life is to be present for it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And to be truly present means to truly know who you are and coming in your presence. What does presence mean to you, and how do you show up with it?
So many of my peers, so I'm 30, so many of my peers are starting to have like audible panic in their voice when they talk about their age and their lives. And I think that is a miserable way to live. I don't want to be anxiously counting the years, counting the minutes, and I don't. But I think mindfulness practice helps to really slow time down, and you really get the most out of, like, I love when me and some friends, we have like a fun plan. we're gonna play some video game that we're all excited about, or we're gonna like go on a big hike, or do something fun. And I just savor like using some of the mindfulness skills that I've learned. I try to savor every second. And if I'm able to do that, like alcohol gets in the way of that often, and there's like just kind of like blithely just watching TV with people that gets in the way of that. But like if I'm able to be present and we're all just present together, talking, laughing, like the night lasts forever, and it's a great, and I feel so satisfied at the end of the night, and I feel better for it. I'm closer to my friends after that.
You killed it with that part. It's impermanence. You're speaking on a huge Buddhist tenet, which is impermanence. And I think people get really attached to their anxious thoughts because they think it's everything. But in meditation, you realize how quick the thoughts go. Even your most terrible ones will be gone and replaced with something else soon. Everything is impermanent. This moment here is impermanent. The people listening, sitting in their car or at home listening, you're listening right now to what I just said now, and it's done.
It's already done.
It's done. Yeah. And so the first of the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism is life is dukkha, life is suffering. And the second is we suffer because we attach. So your friends that are 30, which is so young, your friends that are 30 that are like, I'm getting old. It's because they're attaching to being in their 20s, their attachment. And attachment is the root of so much of our suffering, including attachment to who we think we are because we don't actually know who we are.
Now, I struggled with this principle for a long time. I decided I was ideologically a Taoist and not a Buddhist because I didn't like the idea that attachment is suffering, because it's good to be attached to the people that you love.
But they're going to die.
That's the thing. So like, how much attachment?
And honeymoon phases end.
Right. Like, do we want to be so attached to our friends or to our friend's opinion of us that every time we say something that's maybe a little politically incorrect or a little inaccurate, a little embarrassing, that we then become filled with anxiety about what they think of us?
The more authentic you are, the less you regret. But you have to sit to know what your authenticity is. You have to sit and go, who am I? I don't regret what I say because I'm sitting and I know that what I'm saying is me. But if I'm saying what the values around my world shape me to say, maybe I'm Democrat, so I'm leaning on that side and just saying what everybody says in that realm, but not really saying what I do, that's where that anxiety comes in. Oh my gosh, are they judging me? Because it's not actually you speaking, but how do you know who you is if you don't sit?
And you're attached to this like ideal and this idealistic persona, and like that's something like I resonate with that a lot too, Greg. That's something like it's taken a lot of work, because one thing that I've been known to say a lot, and like my fiance knows this too, is obviously I share it a lot with her, is there's been times where I'm like, I really wish I would have done this, or that I wish that I wasn't still an addict and I went to school at this point in time, right? Because I didn't go to school till I was 25. And like, if I had not been, tripping face and using a lot of drugs and having fun in my early 20s, I could have been this much further in my career if I would have gotten my shit together. Cool. So, but if I would have gotten my shit together, I would not have known what I've known or realized what I've realized and gone through what I've gone through to be where I'm at.
Maybe you wouldn't even be with Kenna.
No, probably no, 100% wouldn't.
Yeah,
I met her in a tiny ass town in nowhere, Colorado, in a tiny ass school that I would not. Anyway, yeah. So, because she's originally from here, right? So she went to the middle of nowhere very serendipitously, and we had it was our environmental sustainability class, that we just happened to take. And anyway, so certain things happen for certain reasons, and to be attached to, and like that's one thing I just like that you brought that up and like the conversation went that way, because that's one thing that personally like I've had to learn to adapt with and grow from, is the attachment to these ideas that we have. Can
you recognize your attachments? That's huge.
Right. And that's like, and we all know this in a psychological standpoint, is like when we have these big time, these troubles in our life, is when we are dissonant from our ideal self and our real self. Right. And when we have these huge gaps between those two, that's when we have the most trouble, right? That's when we're finding like deep depression and all these other things, because we're not matched up. But if you let go of that attachment to this idea, that whether it's Western culture is pushing it or it's the people in your life that are pushing it, and they're pushing you, because we all know people who come from these families that have these set rules, like you go to Ivy League school, you better get that diploma, you better get a PhD, and you better get a really good job with a good wife or a good husband, and you better have a white picket fence.
Yeah, that's the distractions by default.
Yeah, exactly. And
You know,
when
your
that doesn't
values.
match up, like one of the most powerful questions my dad ever asked me after I graduated high school was, he's like, well, you know, we didn't really talk about college. Like, what do you want to do? And I told him I want to teach skiing. Like, I don't want to go to school. I didn't fit in well with school, so I always had a problem with that. But and his one question to me was, "Are you going to be happy?" And yep, and he always encouraged me.
Wow.
Both
That's
my
really
parents, yeah.
that's really supportive.
Yeah, both my I moved from New Hampshire with $700, and that a dream. That was it.
Wow.
And I went and taught skiing, and I wanted to be a ski bum. And my parents gave me the room to do so, unjudgmentally. Like, I got to be a ski instructor for a really long time.
That's awesome.
Until I went, well, I want more, right? And like, I figured out this life. But anyway, I love that you brought up attachments, because I feel like we get stuck on these ideas that either, whether it's our family, whether it's culture, whether it's friend group, whatnot, are pushing this idea that we have to be attached to, but it's not until we check in with ourselves. That doesn't work, right? And like, checking in with ourselves, that's who tells us. Like, nobody can tell me how to live my life except for me.
But how do you know what you're telling yourself if you're not taking the time to slow down and listen?
Right.
To really listen to you.
That's what I need to
Slow down.
And people
I do
say,
not do
they're
that
like,
well.
I'm so scared. I don't want to say it. I don't want to hear what I have to say. I'm like, oh, honey, please listen.
Well, there you go.
yeah.
if you're
Please
scared, that says something.
Yeah.
And you know, you can avoid learning what's really behind your feelings your whole life, and maybe you'll have a moderately successful life. But you have emphasized I know we got to let you go kind of soon, but you've emphasized over the course of our conversation that it's really important. It is important to learn who you actually are and what's really behind your feelings. And you know, we don't have to heal from our trauma, but it's probably better that we do heal from our trauma, or heal from experiences that may not be like classically traumatic. They may not be like clinically traumatic, but like, we all have wounds. We're all covered in wounds from society or from friends, parents, whatever. And like, better to heal if you can. And would you agree that seated meditation, though it's difficult, is one of the most useful tools for learning who we are and what we are?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because
Yes.
because people do say like, well, my meditation
It
is
doesn't have to be seated. I would say meditation.
okay. So it doesn't have to be seated.
If you're really taking the time to be in the woods, like you've been mentioning, and you're paying attention to you and you're listening to your thoughts, then that can be your most beneficial way of finding yourself. I tell my clients, you will experience anxiety in your life, and you will experience depression. And some of my clients who have been depressed and now are not, I say, you're going to have depression again in your life. And I get a really big reaction to that. But it's also the reality that we are on this planet and we have all of these range of emotions. And the goal for me, at least, is that I can feel every single one of them and know, how does Jessa think when that emotion comes up? How do I feel when this emotion comes up? When my parents pass, how is that going to feel? And I want to be in it and learn, like, God, grief for me looks crazy, or, you know, whatever your shame feels like this, or love feels like this. But you have to be able to slow down. Otherwise, you're going to say love feels like a fairy tale. Love is the Cinderella story, because those were your distractions. So those values become what you think it is. But it's not. And love to me is not a fairy tale. And I know that because when I'm in love, I slow down and I sit and I go, how do I think about this person? And I found that my current partner is the most interesting person I've ever met in my life. And that to me is the apex of love, is can you interest me? That sensation of interest is my feeling of love. But that's different for somebody else.
Yeah.
But how would I have known that if I hadn't slowed down and said, what is love to you? Let's sit for 5 minutes and think about, what is love to me?
Well, I'm glad I asked that.
I do too.
I know we got to wrap up, but yeah, at my martial arts school, seated meditation is viewed as like the most direct way, the sort of most isolated way to just train the mindfulness skill. But if for some people that's not an option, not everybody has a quiet space that they can meditate. Maybe the only time that they can be alone with themselves and be able to focus and chill is when they're out walking, because maybe their home environment isn't peaceful. On the flip side, not everybody has access to green spaces. So if you know, if on the flip side, so like for you, Dylan, being in a green space is your most that's your most direct connection to mindfulness and to yourself. Whereas for somebody who doesn't have that, maybe seated meditation would be a better option. One thing that I have wanted to say, I just want to kind of plug this, is seated meditation is really hard for me. I have a lot of muscle tension just because of my lifestyle and emotions and whatever. So I always need to do some yoga or some other kind of stretching before I sit. And then also after I sit, I need to do some kind of stretching. But
there's meditation in that, and there's mindfulness in that, and that you sit, right? And you're in pain.
Yeah.
And what I would say, what the Buddha says is, use that pain.
Ugh.
There's monks. But like, let's experiment.
That's not what you wanted to hear.
No, let me stretch out first.
Let me learn who I am when I'm in pain. Let me learn how I address this sensation.
Yeah.
What a challenge for you, Greg.
Yeah.
There's monks that go up to the top of this mountain in the snow, and they put a wet blanket on top of themselves, and they're able to turn the blanket into steam and keep themselves warm because they're thinking about the coldness, and they're reflecting on the coldness, and they're using the coldness to regulate their body.
I've
so
heard
you
about
can
that.
use the pain to regulate your body.
Whoa.
You can use your trauma to regulate finding yourself, figuring out who you are. Everything can be used when you're...
I mean, pain just tells you what's healing or what's going on in your body. I think that's like a
It's a
really
signal.
good... it's a signal, and I think that's a really good perspective of it. And,
So is anxiety. It's a signal.
Yeah, it's a shitty signal. It's not a fun... Like, let me put it on this one. That's not a fun signal, and it needs to cut it out.
I did a lot of when I only started
Needs
doing.
to cut it out.
I had never done any yoga before a couple years ago, before COVID actually, and so all of my meditation training at the Blue Dragon School I was tight. I was just locked up everywhere. I had that experience. I just want, like, for anybody out there who's struggling with meditation, I would say, like, stretching the body, stretching and aligning the body, because yoga isn't just about stretching. It's also about strengthening and, like, aligning the spine, just aligning the whole body. Doing that really helps me to drop into a mindful state. So it could be, would you agree that can be like a bridge? It could be a bridge for some people to make it easier so so once they've had a successful experience where they feel like they got something out of their meditation, that could keep them coming back. It's like an incentive. Like, all right, well, if I stretch beforehand, if I do some yoga beforehand, that'll make the meditation easier and maybe more productive. Or again, are we getting back into goal-oriented meditation?
Beautiful that you realize that.
Okay. It definitely helps for me because muscle tension is a big obstacle. So for anybody out there, it might help you, but also pain can be a teacher. So that's both sides.
And if it's not comfortable to sit, meditate while you put your laundry away.
Yes, that's
Just
another option.
Wonder, who am I while you're putting your laundry away? Hear your thoughts and go, I'm a person who thinks a lot about other stuff.
Yeah.
Just
So
imagine Jessa's just smoky voice in your mind
Oh,
telling you to relax.
My boy voice.
it's got like a Macy Gray tinge to it.
No, it's good.
You know, I like it. It's got that like lounge-esque.
It's perfect. Your voice
Sound
is
to
perfect
it.
for what you do.
Yeah.
So before we let you go, Jessa, do you have anything else you'd love to tell anybody listening? Any input on meditation and or who's interested in getting into meditation or scared or intimidated about it?
Anything I want to tell people? Yes. So depression is, Latin root for depression is deprimere. Deprimere means to be pressed down. So depression is when you are pressing yourself down. Anxiety is a signal. And meditation is a gateway to figuring out who you are.
I like that.
That was
It's a good
sick.
message.
I like that. It's
Very
the
concise.
telephone to yourself.
Oh, I like that.
Yes.
Answer it.
Yes, answer it. It's calling.
But also let it ring for a little bit.
Ooh.
Yes, let it ring for a month. Let it ring for a month. Learn. You don't got to speed up the process. Let it ring for a month.
You gotta make them feel.
And then check the voicemails.
Yeah, yeah. That's right.
You can't be too thirsty. You can't be
check
too
the
thirsty for
voicemails.
the self. You gotta let them want it. They gotta chase it.
And Jessa, where can people find your work?
Yeah, at Therapy Jessa on TikTok. That's my current platform.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. And you serve the Seattle area, correct?
Seattle area. I'm currently full,
Okay.
but I do. So.
But TikTok is never full.
TikTok's
No, it's
never
not.
full, and I love my
No, it's not.
followers. They're everything. I just posted some today. I was like crying looking at them.
Oh.
I just love you all.
Oh, good for
love
you.
that.
That's awesome.
I love it. And thank you for coming down and sitting with us and having this conversation.
Absolutely.
It's much
Yeah,
appreciated.
Thank you, Jessa. Thanks so much.
And we look forward to curating this relationship with you and having you come down or us coming up and having another conversation.
Yeah.
Because why not?
Meditate before your future for podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I think that's going to have to become, because
I see the smile on Greg's face.
let me
I'm just
tell
imagining
you.
trying to get Nick to do that.
Well, let me tell you, typically our hour to 2 hours before our podcast are not full of meditating.
Not very meditative.
Pretty much the opposite.
Yeah, it's pretty busy.
A lot of shit talk and vaporwave. And
But then that ends up carrying into it, right?
Yeah, it does.
That energy keeps somebody shows up and they're like, oh, I'm in the hustle and bustle of their vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
Yeah, that's
I would
true.
say
That's a
so.
good point.
I would say so.
We gotta open that container.
Oh,
Or
what a
close it?
callback.
Create that
Create the
container.
container.
Yeah, what a
Create the
callback.
container.
Yeah. No, it's a great concept. But yeah, Jessa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to, and just put it out there. All of our information, all our links, everything's kind of on our website, unzipmind.com. Get at us on there. Give us any comments, any messages, anything you guys want to hear, any comments on this episode.
Yep. If any of you try meditation and you want to relate your experience, you can leave us a comment and maybe start a conversation about it.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.